Hello, I'm Julie Hyde. I work for Centre of England Arts, where I teach drawing and watercolours to all levels. Today we're going to be looking at doing a watercolour painting. We're going to be doing this picture of beach huts, which is in Southwold. It's a nice, simple little picture, which we'll be going to build up gradually in stages, working with the sky, sea and beach area. And then when that's dry, we'll be looking at putting the beach huts themselves on and then building up the foreground. To save you writing everything down as we work through this picture, I have produced this instruction sheet for you, which is easily downloadable from the website. We're going to start off with a simple drawing onto watercolour paper. This is quite a heavyweight paper, it's about 400 gram weight. Keep the drawing very simple, you only want a few guidelines on there. There's the horizon line, which is about a third of the way down. Keep that very, very light, very faint, just a suggestion of that. And then the outline of the beach huts. I've also put a few little lines on here for where I think I want a few little bits of grass, a bit of the fencing, and giving me a little lead in with the pathway coming in between the beach huts up to the shoreline. Before starting to paint, before we start putting water or anything onto the piece of paper, we need to mix up the colours we're going to use first of all. You can decide whatever colours you want to use, but I'm going to use a peachy colour, which I'll make up with a little burnt sienna and a little touch of alizarin crimson to make it a little bit more pinky colour. That's just for the colouring into the sky there, the colouring of the clouds. I'm going to make separate puddles. I'm going to use the water and make a little bit of a puddle of blue. You can use an ultramarine blue or a cobalt blue, whichever you prefer. I've got a little bit of cobalt blue in my palette over here, so perhaps I'll use a bit of that one. Making puddles of paint. It is quite useful to test your colours somewhere first to see how strong they are. I'm also going to make up a bit of purply colour with the ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson to give me quite a deep purply colour to add some variation into the sky. I'm going to reuse these paints in various areas on the painting. So now those colours are mixed up, ready and waiting, I'm just going to clean my brush, dry it out. I'm going to start wetting the paper. This is a mop brush, and we're going to use mop brush and clean water, not the one I've been using to mix with. I'm going to take the mop brush, I'm going to wet completely all over the sky area. Just move that. To make it shiny and glossy wet. Wherever you want soft areas with watercolours, keep it shiny and wet. So I'm wetting right down, right to the top of the beach huts, perhaps going back the other way with it to keep an even gloss onto that area. Clean your brush, take out any surplus puddles. If you tilt your head and look at it from the side, you can see where you've got puddles of paint and where it's going dry. Just swap my brush over and I'll go back to my big brush now and into the various colours I'm going to use. I'm going to put patches of these different colours in now. I'm going to start off with the blue in various areas just to give you a little bit of colouring there. Don't be frightened of leaving some areas white. That means without paint on. So you can actually leave areas which don't need to be painted there. It gives you some white clouds into this. I'm going to bring these colours, as I'm using them, down a little way into the sea as well. So just across the picture. Clean my brush, go into my next colour, a little bit of the peachy colour, and put a few of those bits in there. Again, leaving some areas without paint on. Letting them merge slightly, letting them blur. As the paper's wet, the colours fuzz and blur nicely. Again, while I've got that on my brush, I'll just put a few more stripes of that into the sea. Straight into the darker, stronger purpley colour, and put a little bit more interest and a little bit shape into these clouds with a few little spots and touches of the purple colour. And clean the brush and just put in just a few little flicks of the purpley colour as well into the sea. Not everywhere, just where I've put it up above there, into the base there. So while that bit's drying, I can just carry on with the sand, the first layer of the beach. This is a bit like doing your undercoat. We're going to leave a lot of this showing behind here. I forgot to mix my colours up first, so I shall go back in. I've got a little bit of the peachy colour. I also want to make up a little bit more of a sandy colour with a yellow ochre, or you can use raw sienna. Just a little bit of a grubby yellow colour. I'm going to use this one, that one as well, and perhaps even just some burnt sienna on its own to give a variation into that sand. So now I've done that, back to my mop brush, into this area in between the beach huts a little way, down in front of the beach huts, across there, the foreground, up into the beach huts just a little way, and we're up to the shoreline, and then bringing that water down across the foreground there. And again, I'm just going to look at it from the side, make sure there's no dry patches on there, clean my brush, dry it out, and just take out any puddles which happen to be sitting there. I always have my board slightly tilted so I know that the puddles aren't going to sit in the middle of a picture, that they'll be flowing down the paper. Straight away then, into these different colours, perhaps put a bit of yellow ochre in between the beach huts just as it comes up the top there, across to the side, and then swap straight into the other colours. This is the peachy colour that was in the sky, across the foreground, and across again, with a bit more of this colour. Perhaps swap to the burnt sienna colour, giving you different bands of these colours. Again, because it's wet all over, it'll just blur and blend in together. This is just the undercoat. This will show through at the end, in between the grasses. And again, just bringing this lovely peachy colour through the picture there. And off the bottom of the paper. Dry your brush and take out any little puddles or runs. I'm now going to have to let the whole thing dry a little bit before I do anything else. It does need to dry now, and it is usual or quite normal to use an ordinary hairdryer just to dry it out. Don't put it on full blast, just gently blows over. We're going to work on the sea area now. I'm going to use the same colours we've had before, so those are all ready and waiting. We're going to re-wet this area using the mop brush, but we don't want it quite as wet as we had it previously. We're just going to wet up to the horizon line, which we carefully drew on earlier, and just put a few bands of water on there. It doesn't matter if there's little gaps in it this time, as long as they're horizontal. So that means going across your picture that way. So anything to do with water, if you keep your brush strokes horizontal going across your picture, it will look like water. So I'm putting a little bit of water on, so it's taking the edge off the paper, and so it's not so dry, and it'll allow the colours to run slightly, but not as much as it was for the first layer that we put on there. So now I've put that on there, I'll swap back to my big brush again, and we're going to go in with some of these colours that we had earlier, and we're going to put little bands of colour into that, not necessarily all the way across the picture. If you leave a little bit of a gap in the middle, it allows the eye to travel through it, and just bring them across. They'll blur just a little bit, but you're not completely covering this area again. You're just putting in some little touches of colour and down to the beach huts and in between the beach huts. Whatever you put one side of the beach hut, make sure it comes out the other side. So it goes through and out again. Bringing this forward onto the shore, adding in the little bits of colours that you've got in your sky. Whatever colour you've done the sky, it will pick up into the water. If you want to add a little wave, and I don't mean that sort, I mean the wave coming in, we're going to just add a little bit of darker tone under a light band that you've got somewhere in your picture. So, for example, there's a little light patch here, so I'm going to swap to a smaller brush and just put a little bit of the stronger, darker blue or the purple just underneath a little bit of the light band there. So leaving it light on the top and a little bit darker underneath to make it look like a band coming in there, a little wave coming in there. A little bit more down there. And again, let that dry a little bit. While that's drying, we can just put the shadows onto the sides of the beach hut. So we just want a little bit of colouring onto the sides of the beach hut here. I'd probably use a smaller brush. This is something like a 6 round. They're just nylon brushes, nothing special, they're not sables or anything like that. And for the sides of the beach hut, they're going to have a little bit of shadow on. And again, I'm going to use the purples and the blues that are in the picture here. Wet down the side of the beach hut. You can probably do wet all three at the same time here. And just put in a little bit of the purpley colour, a little bit of the blue colour, just to make it look like it's a little bit more shady on that side. And I'm just going to blend it in slightly, just push it together. I'm constantly drying my brush on a bit of tissue just to lift colours back out again or take out puddles of paint. I'm just controlling the strength. This one also needs a little bit of shading down the side of it, so I'll wet down the side of that, and the same again, a little bit of purple, a little bit of the blue colour for the shadows. It's a bit strong, so I'll dry my brush and just take it out a little bit. And I might even just tickle in a little bit of the peachy colour as well, where it would be picking up the reflected light down the sides there. And we let it dry again now at this stage. Now that's dried out on there, we can put the colouring, the fun part this is, putting the colouring over the beach huts themselves. Colour choice is entirely up to you, but I'm going to use the blues I used earlier, a little bit of a yellowy colour, probably a cadmium yellow or something like that. You might want to use an orangey colour, a cadmium red, a bright red. So I'm going to mix these colours up first of all. So some of the beach huts are going to be blue, they can be stripy colours. I'll keep them fairly limited. I wouldn't use too many different colours because it confuses the viewer when they come to look at the picture. Perhaps a bit of the cadmium yellow colour. Keep that one quite weak. We might have a little weak yellowy colour over the one beach hut. And perhaps we'll make up a little bit more of an orangey red, which is a bit of this cadmium red and a little bit of cadmium yellow to give me a nice bright beach hut in the middle there. We'll also be needing to put some dark onto the roofs. We want a dark grey colour, so I'm going to use ultramarine blue, and yes, I am putting it into the grubby palette that I've already used before because that was quite weak, that colour in comparison. And we're going to use a dark brown colour, burnt umber. Mix those two together and you'll get a very dark tone. And we'll start putting some of the colours on the beach huts themselves. I'll start with the blue one. So a nice strong blue. We're going to go over this side of the beach hut, bringing it down, start at the top, just not quite strong enough, I'm just going to put a bit more paint into that, over the side of the beach hut and across that shadow I've just put on there, because shadows will show through and it will just make that area look quite a bit darker when it's dried out. So again, across the beach hut, gradually working down. Now as you get down to the bottom here, where it starts to hit the sand, if you zigzag your brush into that sandy colour you've just put on there, it will start to make it look like the grass is growing up the side of the beach hut. So we're painting over this little beach hut on the other side while we're waiting for the first one to dry. So I'm painting over those. Some of them I've had to go over a couple of times to get it nice and strong and dark. And then a little bit of a taper to the stripes on this side to give you some perspective, flattening out as we go down here, over the shadows that we've put on there, down the side to give you the edges, and breaking it up towards the bottom. While that one's drying, we can go back to this side again, and stripes across the side here. Again, you might want to just give yourself a few little lines as a guideline to work down the picture. Down into the foreground and break it up as it comes down there. Onto the sides, a little bit more at an angle, and then they flatten out as they get down towards the centre of the beach hut. A little bit of edging down the beach hut. Let's put a slightly different colour one on. This one doesn't touch the other one, so I can go straight onto that one with a little bit of a weak yellowy colour. That's a little bit bright. Let's put a bit more water to it. And just a little bit of a weak wash over that and over the shadow on the side. We will need eventually, when this is all dry, just to put a little bit of detail onto the plain ones, put a few little stripes on for the boarding. Last little beach hut with just the colouring is a nice orangey red, straight over the side of that one. Again, get a little bit more puddly. Drag a puddle of paint around when you're doing a small area of this, rather than trying to eke your paint out. Make sure a puddle's on there, and then break it up a little bit, or even zigzag it into that foreground, because that will look like the grass is in the end. We're just going to put the roofs on, and that's using the ultramarine blue and burnt umber to give you a very dark tone. And again, just drag this puddle across the area. I'm going to leave the edges of this roof white to give you some contrast in there, but the little end pieces, we'll put those in nice and dark there. This will probably just have a little line. You can just see the top of the roof on that one. So again, this one here, a nice dark roof onto that, and a little bit of the end piece onto it. This one again, let's have the dark blue, dark brown mix on the edges and the roof as well. So some of these plain ones need just a hint of the boarding on there. So for the blue one, into the blue paint, and it's just a few little lines going across to break up that flat surface to make it look a little bit more like the boards. This is now onto the dry paper here, perhaps the edging bits and a few little stripes down the side. This one with the stripy one, just go over the ones on the side with a little bit darker paint to make the shadowy side look slightly darker. A few little stripes across here for the panels on this little beach hut, and again a few down the side there. We're now going to start looking at doing the grasses in the foreground here. So again, we need to mix our colours up first that we're going to use for that. We want some yellow ochre, so a little puddle of the yellow ochre colour. We're going to make a green colour up as well. So I'm going to use the yellow that I had before for the beach hut and add a little bit of ultramarine blue to it to turn it into a green colour. And we're going to use the same colours we used on the roofs, the bluey grey colour, the ultramarine blue and burnt umber mix, which I've still got some left there. So now we're going to use a smallish brush. This is again a 6 round, and we're going to do some grasses on here, doing zigzag patches onto the foreground area. So this is onto dry paper, and we're just going to do one clump at a time with all those 3 colours. So we're going to start off with the yellow ochre colour. I'm going to put some varying heights, varying levels of yellow ochre colour coming up into the beach hut. Doesn't matter if you don't follow the lines completely that you'd left there. Zigzagging it along just a little way, quite long, about an inch or so long. Then we go in with the greeny colour and put a little bit of that into it, not all the way up, so it's some run into it, into the yellow ochre colour that you put on there, some don't. Just vary the direction. I've been going round in different directions as well with that. And then in with a darker bluey green colour and just touch that in down towards the bottoms of these clumps. The bits you've left behind looks like the lighter bit from the clump underneath it. So just add in those towards the bottom, letting them blur up slightly. We're going to move on to another patch, do the same thing again, zigzagging some little varying height grasses. Yellow ochre first, lighter one first, coming up, touching the beach huts, tapering them down towards the end of the beach huts, then straight in with the greeny colour. I don't bother cleaning my brush in between, zigzagging some more lines down into that. Some touch into it, some make new patches, and then perhaps bring those up to cover the bottom of the beach hut, and then touch in with a darker bluey green. I'm going to continue all around the foreground here, leaving some of the sand that I put on there originally to show through. So it's not completely covering it, but going into various areas on here, letting those bits dry and then working in between. Right, we're nearly there now, just a few more grasses. You can leave more gaps than I've left if you want to. So the choice is yours of how many grasses you put in and how much you put in here. But I'm just doing this last little bit just around here, sorry. And a bit more of the green into the bottom of this one, letting it run together. It'd be quite nice to actually put some of the little fence posts that you see at the seaside into here. So I'm just thinking about any spaces that you've got. You could put a little bit of the ultramarine blue and burnt umber, the dark colour that you've got here, and put a fence post or two into the grassy bits, just so they're disappearing down into the grass there, and perhaps a little thin line, give you a bit of the fencing that goes across there, perhaps a little diagonal one that should come down onto the path, and a few more on this side. Let's make that ultramarine blue and burnt umber bit mix a little bit stronger. Just bringing these down, 2 or 3 of them, a few more into here, as if they're disappearing into the grass, perhaps have them falling over a bit to make those little quirky little fence lines that you see at the seaside. And then on 1 or 2 over there. We've just got to add a few little footprints in to give it a little bit of character. So where this little gap's left here, I want to leave it as a lead into the picture to put some little steps into it. So using the same peachy colour we had before, weaken it down a bit. So put a little bit more water with it. And then just a few little dashes and dots, don't make them too even, across into the gap there to look like broken sand. Don't take this right up to the sea, otherwise it looks like somebody's just run into the sea and disappeared. So just let it fade away as it touches the beach. Okay, once you think you've nearly finished, we need to just check it, look at the finished article, and perhaps just go back on and put a few little extra lines in here and there to make edges a little bit more defined. And then once you get to that point, you can see that you've produced a finished painting. A complex picture is made easy by breaking it down into simple stages. We've gone through the whole process step by step, and this is what I do each week at Centre of England Arts in our weekly classes. We approach a variety of different subjects, each of them broken down stage by stage to enable you to paint anything.